Well, hello, and welcome to the MilVet Podcast. Your podcast hosts are Brendan Aronson, Tim Shaw, and Beau Higgins. We are military veterans, entrepreneurs, and investors. But most importantly, we strive to empower military service members, veterans, and their families. We believe that all veterans deserve a career that fires them up, a career in which you can learn, you can earn, and you can build a world-class network. On this podcast, we interview civilian and military veteran leaders who are incredible founders, writers, thinkers, and investors. My primary goal is to inspire you to achieve great things. Let's dive into today's episode. Well, hello, and welcome to another edition of the MilVet Podcast. I'm your host, Beau Higgins, and I have the honor and privilege to be here today with France Hoang. For those that are maybe joining in for the first time for the MilVet Podcast or not familiar with the MilVet provides an executive pathway for veterans to get into the private equity and venture capital space. I encourage anyone to sign up for our newsletter to learn more about the MilVet. But in addition to supporting our veterans that are maybe transitioning into the PE/VC space, we like to bring on some of those folks that have been there and done that, veterans that have made the transition successfully and share some of their experiences, lessons learned of what they did, what they wish they would do differently. And today, France, we are a pleasure to have you here today and talk a little bit about your experiences to get where you are today. And with that, I would love for you to give an intro and talk about what you are doing today.
Well, first off, Beau, it's an absolute pleasure to be here. Great to join you in the MilVet podcast. I've known Brendan for a long time and really admired the work he's done and the whole work the whole organization's done. I'm France Hoang. I am currently the co-founder and CEO of a company called BoodleBox. We are building AI infrastructure for lifelong learning and work with AI. We can go into more details about what that means, but we're trying to solve a very top of mind problem. There's 60 million knowledge workers in the United States, 18 million students. Today's students are tomorrow's workers, and we are trying to prepare everybody from student to current worker for this AI-enabled world.
Well, I am excited to learn about more of that myself because I could use all the help I can get when it comes to AI. But before we get to there, let's go back to the beginning and your roots of their military experience, kind of how it all started, maybe how your path began, and talk about the journey some. So, obviously, you're a West Point grad. I know a proud West Point grad. I would love to hear how that happened. I mean, it's everybody has a story of what inspired them or how West Point or the academies in general got on their radar, and would love to hear yours and how that worked out for you.
Thanks for the question, Beau. I've been very blessed. I once asked, what's the reward for a lifetime of service? And I truly believe the reward for a lifetime of service is a lifetime of service. And my start was from the very get-go. I was born in Vietnam. My father was a South Vietnamese Army officer. My mother worked for the U.S. Naval Attaché. In the closing days of the Vietnam War, just before Saigon fell to communist forces, I was evacuated on an Air Force C-141 Starlifter, flown from there to a Navy base on Guam, flown from there to Marine Corps Base Pendleton. So the very first place I ever lived, Beau, was courtesy of the U.S. Marine Corps. I lived in a GP medium tent at Pendleton. And then from there was flown to an Army National Guard base in Washington State and ended up being taken in by a sponsor family, my family and I, and grew up in a little town called Tumwater, Washington. And so it literally took every branch of the armed services to bring me here to the United States and get settled. But so I'm an immigrant, and I have a superpower that immigrants have, which is we always have the ability to be grateful for whatever we have, because there's an alternate universe where I didn't get to do any of those things, right? And where my family was still stuck back in Vietnam, and I would have grown up in a very different world. Growing up, though, here in the United States, I had a wonderful, childhood. I was a child of the 80s, so I rode my bikes out and explored the world until the streetlights came on, and that was time to get home. Prior to the internet, prior to social media. But I did learn about my family's journey and about the service and sacrifice of Vietnam veterans. And so from a young age, I decided that I was going to devote my life to service. And the way I was going to repay the debt I felt I owed to those Vietnam veterans was to serve in the very same military that rescued me. And so that's what led me to want to go into the service. Despite the fact that I grew up in Washington State, Beau, I didn't know how to swim and I have terrible eyesight. So that kind of eliminated 2 out of the 3 major service academies. And so that's how I ended up at West Point.
Well, however it worked out is great. And I do love the fact that every one of the armed force branches had a hand in getting you over here. And I was actually stationed in Guam as well as the Marine det there. So
Oh, no way. Oh, that's great.
I appreciate going through Guam and the special place that holds for so many people. But love the fact that you figured it out. You figured out kind of maybe by process of elimination, you got to West Point. And what was that? What was that like for you? I mean, it's obviously a different world, not a world that everyone has insight to, and everyone certainly, I think, it's an amazing place. The first time I visited was last year, to be honest, and I was blown away by it. I'm not sure I could have done it personally, but it was an amazing place. So tell me a little bit about the time there and what that, how that kind of again maybe helped to kind of make the next step in your journey of you knew you wanted to have a life of service and wanted to give back and felt compelled in some ways because of the blessings that you would receive to get into the situation you were, and then what was that, what did the West Point experience kind of begin for you or open for you, maybe the process for you?
Well, because we're not playing Navy or Air Force in football this weekend, I will say the following. I think all the service academies are amazing places, and I think they all are incredible institutions because they're the one place where every student there has made a commitment to service, right? And not to say that you can't be commissioned in other places and have amazing opportunities. And one of the things that makes our military great is the fact that people come from all kinds of backgrounds and educational upbringings and end up collating into green or blue or green, or purple, whatever your branch of choice is. So I don't even know what color the Space Force is. I guess that's black. I'll have to figure that one out. But for me, right, I was called to West Point for a couple of reasons. One, I was recruited there by a retired 3-star general who was himself a Vietnam veteran. And I think, I didn't know it at the time, but I think he took an interest in me because of his service in Vietnam and his feeling that we could have done more and we should have done more. And his name was Lieutenant General Howard Francis Stone, and I owe him a lot. It was also an interesting experience because of my family's journey. My dad and my mom escaping from war, they didn't want that life for me, and so they were very opposed to me attending West Point and joining the service. And in fact, they disowned me for going to West Point 3 days before I showed up. They said, "Look, you can either go to West Point or you can remain our son, but you can't do both." And so at a very young age, I had to decide what service meant to me and what I was willing to sacrifice to serve. And so the decision to go to West Point, was a bit of a sacrifice. I had to make a stand against my own family, which was very difficult for a 17-year-old to do. At the same time, though, it kind of gave me a superpower, right? Like, talk about being focused. I showed up to West Point on the first day and, had defied my parents. I felt like Richard Gere in An Officer and a Gentleman, right? I have nowhere else to go. That was me at West Point on our day.
That's a crazy story. I mean, probably not maybe the safest route to go, but you jumped and did it, and obviously were successful in doing it, despite of not having the support from home, which is tough. I'm sure you had to feel a little, alone, out of sorts. I mean, up in northern New York, it's cold up there. It's not quite what you were used to. I mean, how'd that go for you? I mean, what was that?
Yeah. But I will tell you, in one ways, yes, I was at a disadvantage. There are people whose parents are West Pointers, or they have the support, the loving support of their parents through a very difficult time. But I have to say, even though my own parents didn't support me, what ended up happening was I had multiple sets of surrogate parents, right? Professors took me in, classmates' parents took me in, all of these people that once they learned about kind of my journey, took me under their wing. And so in that sense, I was blessed, right, with having dozens of father figures and mother figures who cared deeply about me and wanted to see me succeed. And so in that sense, I felt wondrously blessed. And my classmates, who, I think all classmates at service academies are close, but I feel a particular bond to my classmates and a deep sense of gratitude because when I didn't have my own family support, they became my family and supported me. And classmates were taking me in for Christmas and spring break and the holidays. And in a very real sense, West Point was my home for 4 years. I literally had nowhere else to go.
So, France, moving on from your West Point time, obviously set a good base for success for you. And again, I love the fact how you did turn those positives or negatives into positive out there. But we'd love to talk about your actual time on active duty, because I would say you had somewhat of a non-traditional career in the military. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's a good way to say it. Non-traditional is a good label. I've been actually commissioned twice and decommissioned twice. So the first time was after obviously after I graduated from West Point, I gave up graduation leave. I went to Ranger School. Then I reported to the military police basic officers course. And I spent 5 years as a Army MP, peacekeeper in Bosnia. Then I was assigned to Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, voluntarily, just to be clear. And served as an Army MP, led SWAT teams for the military. Then I had a 9-year break in service, became a lawyer, did things that lawyers do in DC, including in my case, having a chance to work in the White House. And then I recommissioned again a second time and served in the Army as an Army captain in my mid-30s.
And you back in the JAG course. You went as an MP still, or in the JAG side?
No, again, non-traditional. I was actually working in the White House. I'd been out of uniform at this point for 9 years, no longer even commissioned. And a friend of mine who was in the White House in our last month came to me and said, "Hey, France, I don't know what you're doing when we leave the White House, but my unit, I'm in this National Guard. I'm a Special Forces company commander. My unit is mobilizing in 60 days and I don't have an executive officer. What do you think?" And I look at him, I go, "What do you think what?" And he goes, "What do you think about coming along?" And so I said, "Look, I don't even have a commission anymore. I haven't put on a uniform in 9 years and I'm not Special Forces."
Right.
And he goes, "Oh, we can figure that all out." So in the span of 60 days, I actually recommissioned as an officer, got assigned to a National Guard unit, mobilized, and slotted into a Special Forces captain slot. FYI, I'm not a Special Forces captain. and deployed to Afghanistan as the XO of a Special Forces company.
That is crazy. In 60 days, I didn't know the government can move that. I guess if they want it done, they can make anything happen. I've learned that too, I guess. If they really want it done, everything is waiverable and everything can be done.
There were multiple general officer sign-offs involved. Let's just say that.
That's hilarious. Well, I do want to back up a little bit because your career progression is unique, certainly. I mean, especially when we'll get to what you're doing now, but you transitioned once out of the Army. What was that first transition like for you? Was it, because you didn't stay in the MP Corps, you went to school, obviously, and got your law. But what was that first transition like for you? And kind of what, I guess you knew you wanted to do that for a while to go back and get your law degree, or how did that?
No, I actually had no intention of being a lawyer whatsoever, Beau. There's for those of you who are a little older, you remember John Lennon's famous saying, right? "Life is what happens to you while you're busy making other plans." I wanted to be an FBI agent. That was my singular focus. I loved the Army. I had a great experience, but I knew I wanted to continue service in other ways. And that's fine, right? Not everyone... We all eventually get out of the Army or the military, and not all of us are going to serve 20 years. In fact, the military is not designed to have everyone serve 20 years. I knew I wanted to be an FBI agent, or so I thought. But when it came time to apply to the FBI was on a hiring hiatus, and it would be for 3 years. So I had to find a way to kill time. And so I went to law school to kill time, not to become a lawyer. But I ended up falling in love with the law and really liking it. I kind of have a habit of doing things and not caring what the outcome would be, and it turns out to be some of the best decisions ever made.
it, it is fascinating. So I think also, if you would have wanted to join the FBI, being a lawyer is one of the only ways to get in a lot of times. Just helicopter pilots and lawyers. That's what they always wanted. That's what my memory serves.
That is absolutely true. Yeah. I showed up to law school thinking grades don't matter. I don't have to do well. I'm just going to be joining the FBI anyways. Ended up doing really well. Kind of the same thing with my Army career. Hey, I'm not going to be staying in anyways, whatever. I think multiple times during my Army career, I made decisions that were not in my career interest, so to speak. But ended up having a great 5-year, first stint in the Army and 4 years the second time. I think there's a power to not caring, Beau.
I couldn't agree more. And I think there's also a part of this grow where you're planted, right? I love that people tell you that, you are where you are, make the best out of it. You can make the best out of any situation. If you want to go and mope about it and complain about it, you can do that too. But look, this is where I'm at. I'm going to make the best of this thing. And it may be, again, non-traditional. It may not be the way that some people would do it, but this is where I am. I am going to do it my way. It's maybe not the smartest way, but this is where I am. I'm going to utilize the resources that are here for me and make the best of it. And I always love when people one of my old bosses in the Marine Corps said, I got stationed. My second tour in the Marine Corps was as the SSO, so the guy that managed the security clearances at headquarters of the Marine Corps. I'm a lieutenant. I can see why this would be. You think this is horrible, but you're going to meet some different people and interesting things and grow where you're planted. And it really ended up being one of the greatest things that, started off like, oh my gosh, what am I doing here? And then it just ends up being just an amazing opportunity, so 100% believe that.
Yeah, that goes back to this idea of grit, right? Just, making it happen because you have to. But also, I think beyond just grit, which kind of has this implied just surviving, right? But I think we want to do more than just survive. You want to find a way to thrive, right? And make the most of where you're at, which is what you're talking about, Beau. There should be another word for that, right?
100%.
Not just
it's not just making it through and just collapsing at the end zone. It's making it through and improving while you're in there and taking advantage of turning those negatives into positives, making those relationships, those connections, whatever it is, that you can learn something everywhere you are, and maybe you're learning something that's something you don't want to do, which a lot of times is important as what you do want to do, but you're still learning, and as long as you're always learning and figuring it out, I think you always keep moving on that forward trajectory, no matter where the path may lead sometimes. That's good stuff.
Yeah,
So,
I agree 100%.
So you finished law school, and then where'd you do with it after that?
Yeah. So I finished law school. I ended up clerking for a judge, which is like being an aide-de-camp to a judge, being a law clerk. Then I worked at a terrific law firm called Williams Connolly, one of the best litigation, if not the best litigation firm in the country. Then I clerked for another judge, and then ended up at the White House, right? And ended up working as a lawyer for the president for 2 years, which was an amazing experience. In many ways, being a lawyer for the president is like being a lawyer anywhere else. You're doing the same kind of lawyer things, but because it's for the president, for the White House, for the executive office of the president, it's unlike anywhere else, right? Because the stakes are so much higher. And it was just an absolutely amazing experience for a young lawyer.
No, it's a phenomenal experience. And again, one would think the next step from there may be, who knows what, going to be a judge or going to be wherever, but you then go re-enlist in the Army after that time.
I literally
calculus there. That seems a little.
I literally went from picking out ties in the West Wing to picking out hand grenades on patrol in Afghanistan in like 6 months. A little bit of a contrast.
Yeah.
So when I was in the White House, there was veteran events, and I found myself avoiding them, Beau. And I realized at some point was the reason I was avoiding the veterans events was because I personally felt like I hadn't done my part. That this was the post 9/11 GWAT Army. We were in the fight of our generation, Iraq, Afghanistan. every generation is called to serve in some ways. This was the fight of my generation, and I felt like I had not done my part. You know what? Now, this was someone who had served 5 years.
Right.
I'd been a peacekeeper in Bosnia, honorably discharged. But in my own mind, right? You know, what do West Pointers do? They moved to the sound of the guns, and there was guns firing, and I had not moved to the sound of them. And so I'm very grateful to the Army and to my friend who asked me to come back, because when he asked me, it just felt right. It's like, okay, here's my opportunity to serve. And of course, right, when a buddy of yours asks, hey, do you want to go to war together? There's only one answer to that question, right? And I was single at the time, and it just felt right that this was my chance to continue to serve and to pay back. And again, going back to this where this all began, you know, in many ways, I felt like Afghanistan was like the Vietnam of our generation, right? Mm-hmm. Here we are fighting, you know, particularly the way Afghanistan was structured, and because of the role of special operations, special forces, where you're fighting alongside our allies, you're training in fighting by, with, and through them, that this just felt like where I was meant to be.
Yeah, no, I can definitely see that. And I think you're spot on about that. And I did 3 tours over in Afghanistan, and I get it. And it definitely was that. I mean, being down in some of those villages, working with the Afghan local police program, which I did, is 100%. I can see the similarities. And I can feel, although you shouldn't feel that way. I know I've heard so many people that felt that same way as you. Like, I didn't serve enough before, and then the war started. I needed to do more. Like, you didn't need to, but you it's just there inside of you, because you have that patriotism, you have that give back, and you want to do it, and you did it, which is a lot of people don't do it. They regret not doing it. So good for you for making that step from a place that is, again, a non-traditional way to get there after being in the White House. I love that you're picking out ties, picking out hand grenades. That's pretty good. So all right, so then. I mean, I don't know what the kind of timing was to kind of get into the space you're in now, but obviously you made a big pivot in your career at some point in time. Was that soon after this deployment, or when did you figure out that this lawyer thing was cool? Maybe I've already done this cool thing I want to do now, and I want to do something completely different. Which is
Yeah, I was on a leave of absence from from a U.S. Attorney's office, where I was a prosecutor. And while I was in Afghanistan, I got an email from a former law firm colleague of mine named Joe Fluitt. He was a 160th pilot. He had started the Afghan Air Force essentially with a briefcase full of money back in the mid-2000s. And he sent me an email when I was in Afghanistan telling me that he was starting not 1 but 2 companies. And as soon as I got back, he wanted me to join those companies. And one was a law firm. The other was a company called Magna Aerospace, which operates planes, drones, and helicopters all around the world. And so I get back from Afghanistan, and I'm decompressing and kind of processing it all. And I remember meeting him at a Silver Diner in Northern Virginia. And he says, look, don't go back to the U.S. Attorney's office. I think you should join this law firm, join this aviation company, become an entrepreneur, and help me grow these companies. We'll do amazing things. And I thought about it for a second, and I told him no. And I told him no because I've got all this, like you said, I've got this career path. I'm a lawyer. I've done these things. It's time to get back. This is really risky, and I'm not an entrepreneur. I don't know anything about starting businesses. And he goes, okay, well, if you change your mind, let me know. And I remember walking around DuPont Circle in DC later that night, asking myself, though, like, why did I tell Joe no? And I realized the reason I told him no was because I was afraid of failing. Yeah. That up to this point, I'd been successful at everything I'd done. I knocked it out of the park. And I was afraid that if I became an entrepreneur, that I was going to fail at it. And I think a lot of successful people deep down inside have imposter syndrome, right? That we've just been lucky to date, that at sooner or later, our true colors are going to show. And I realized that I said no out of fear of failure. And the moment I realized that that's what was happening, I texted Joe and I said, hey, let's meet again. And I said, hey, Joe, I'm in. Let's do this. I don't know what I'm doing, but let's do this. I think a lot of entrepreneurs are that way, frankly. If we knew what we were doing, we would never have started down this path, right? Because it is a hard path to continue serving as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, no, it's funny. I've done a handful of these, podcasts in the last few months, and so many of the entrepreneurs or founders just basically said, I jumped in. I had no idea what I was doing, but you can't be afraid to fail. You just have to jump. You have to leap. At some point, you have to make that leap, and not everyone can do it. And that's the thing. That's why it is not an industry for the faint of heart. Or for
No.
that, you have to be willing, and when you jump, you have to be all in. It's not like you can just do a little, lead. It's just like I'm sprinting in. I mean, it's interesting to watch that the mindset. You want to be successful. It's not just a little jump. I mean, it's a cannonball in the deep end, and you're going right. I mean, I'm assuming that's what you've had experience when you did it. It's like, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to be the best at it, like I did in everything else I've done. I've finished at the top, and I've grinded, and I've had that grit to be successful. But it's not like I'm going to check it out for a little while. It's like, all right, I'm committing, right? I mean, is that fair to say?
It is, Beau. And I was two observations. One is, look, I've obviously at this point I've worked in the White House. I've worked at a white collar law firm. I've been to war. The hardest I've ever worked in my life is as an entrepreneur, hands down. The other thing is I get asked a lot by people who are like, hey, France, I want to be an entrepreneur. How do I determine this is right for me? Or should I start this company? And I always tell people the same thing. Ask yourself, do you love this thing enough to fail at it? Do you love this idea? Do you love the customer? Do you love the thing you're going to build? Do you love your co-founders? Do you love something enough to fail at it? Because that's the most likely result out of starting a company. 97% of stage companies fail. They never get to seed stage funding. Only 4% of companies that are in the SaaS, software as a service space, get to 1 million in annual recurring revenue. Only 4 out of 10,000 companies ever reach 100 million in revenue. So the most likely result of you starting a company is failure. So you better embrace that from the beginning. You better start it thinking the most likely result of what I'm going to do is failure. And if you still want to do it, that's how you know you should be an entrepreneur.
That's some great advice. And again, I think it's if you're questioning it, maybe you shouldn't do it, because you have to. It's not for the faint of heart. I mean, you have to be all in, committed to it. Because again, it's not a. It's. I think that's what I realized. This is not as entrepreneurship is not a part-time job. It's not a side hustle. People go, oh, you have to. No, it's if you're doing it, if you want to be successful, it is all in 24/7, and you got to make it, your life. I mean, it becomes your life. I mean, folks I've seen that are successful, and they just the tenacity they end up having, and the willingness to never say, they hit a roadblock here, and that's not going to stop me. I'm going to find a way, even though it's done before. I'm going to find a way. I'm going to find a way because I believe in it. I believe in me, and I believe in my team. I believe in my people. I believe in this thing. People don't get it, but I'm gonna find a way. And it's amazing that people have that. I mean, I've never been able to do that myself, but I love that, and I appreciate that now in founders that I've talked to over the last few months, because that's what it takes, right?
Yeah, and I will say, for all the people listening out there who have been founders or are considering being founders and entrepreneurs, I like the joke, right? Every overnight success is years in the making.
Yeah.
Based on the stats I said, for every successful founder, there's 30 unsuccessful founders. Yet, fascinating, if you look at or if you look at LinkedIn, you don't see 30 times as many people saying failed founder in their LinkedIn profile versus like successful exits. So, it's very easy if you look at social media or if you read TechCrunch to believe that everybody else is just killing it and being a super successful entrepreneur, and you're not. You're struggling. Your company's failing. There's a saying in entrepreneurship land. There's an acronym I like. It's called WIFIO. It's WFIO, and it stands for "We're fucked. It's over." Which is, I think, like the essence of being an entrepreneur, right? You wake up at 9 o'clock, you think this is going to be $1 billion company. at 10 o'clock, you find out you lost your biggest customer or your lead investor has pulled out, both of which have happened to me, by the way. And you're like, we're fucked. It's over, right? At noon. And then by 1 o'clock, you've solved it. And you're like, okay, this is going to be $1 billion company. And so I think there is an unrealistic expectation of what success looks like as an entrepreneur that is biased by what people publicly say about entrepreneurship, right? It is much harder than people think. And if you are in the arena and you haven't given up, by definition, you're doing better than most people are doing.
I love that. I love that. Just not giving up alone is a win. I mean, and it's daily. I mean, it's every day in that fight. And I see that as a dog fight every day. Well, talk a little bit about, okay, so obviously you reconsidered, you accepted the opportunity to be with this company. Were you doing, I assume you wanted to gravitate more toward the aerospace side than the lawyer side, maybe the combination of both. But how'd that first experience go? Was it truly in early startup scrappy phase?
Oh yeah. I was part of both founding teams.
Okay.
So again, part of my insanity, right? Not only did I become an entrepreneur, I joined 2 startups at the same time. I mean, now it was the same team largely, but with some overlap and some not. But the law firm, I was part of the founding team, one of the founding partners. Here we are 15 years later, it's got dozens of lawyers doing really well. Magna Aerospace had a rocket ship ride. We went from startup to 325 million in revenue in 8 years, successful exit. Now, see, that's the bullet point that makes people think like, oh, that was amazing. And what a ride. And how successful you are, France. That's the overnight hockey stick at the end. What I didn't talk about was as a law firm partner, when we were way over our skis on one client, and if that client didn't pay, the law firm would have become defunct, and the partners are writing checks in to keep the firm afloat in the hopes that that money would come in. And it was 50-50 whether or not. I didn't talk about at Mag Aerospace how in order to get our first aviation contract, 6 of us bet the farm. We unloaded our life savings, second mortgages, maxed out credit cards, emptied out 401ks, and bought 3 planes for a contract that was already canceled and had to turn it around. Or the multiple times where we had contracts canceled, contracts go south, and we had to bet it all again to keep the company afloat. Many, many with-yo moments on that journey.
Yeah, it's a little scary. Again, founders, it's not for the faint of heart. It's not for the faint of heart. But, again, like I said, if you have that grit and you have that tenacity and you believe in the people you're working with and believe in the product that you have produced or, the idea, the concept, then you just find a way, and I think that's what it comes down to. How do you find a way and do it with the person on your left and your right, and don't let don't take no for an answer, and again, and put it all on the line. I mean, willing to literally put it all out there and say, I believe in this. I'm going down. I'm going down with everything. I mean, it's not like not partial, not putting a toe in the water. It's just a cannonball in the deep end, right? So yeah.
Yeah, people ask me all the time, like, hey, what are the ingredients to a successful startup? And I have the same answer I've given in other places. It's 1% idea, 49% team, and 50% execution. So really, it's about 99% team, right? It's about the person on your left and the right, and about doing something great with them. People tend to get over enamored with their idea. The idea for a startup may change. In fact, it probably should change, right? The likelihood that you have product market fit right out of the get-go is pretty low. And in fact, my latest company, right, BoodleBox, is a pivot. I'm not the first CEO. That's not our first product. This is not our first fundraise. We didn't get it right the first time, but we hung in there and we got it right the second time, or we're in the process of getting it right anyways. I don't want to, the jury's maybe still out on that, but it's looking good.
Well, let's back up a little bit again. So talk about your first, you obviously closed out one part, your the first investment sold off, and then how long before you were looking? Were you like how quickly did you turn into your next thing? Do you kind of say, all right, I need about a year to chill? You're like, no, I'm
Yeah,
bored. I need to find something new. And how now you're a serial founder, I would say. But
yeah,
how'd that go from after one? Because some people will say, all right, I hit it big, or I'm good. I'm just gonna I've already beat the odds. I'm gonna quit here. I'm ahead, But what's that conversation like almost with yourself? I think it's easier to be successful if you've done it once because you know you're getting into, but it's
yeah.
still the odds are still against you, even if you've done it once before. It doesn't make it easy per se, maybe easier because you know what maybe not to do or what to do. But how'd that
Yeah.
kind of thought process go for you?
Yeah, I will tell you, the second, I'll go back to my military service.
Yeah.
It was easier to deploy as a 21-year-old than a 36-year-old. When I was 21, I was full of piss and vinegar, and I could floss with barbed wire and chew concrete, and I was, just completely, indestructible. As a 36-year-old, I was a little less sure of my indestructibility and a little more life experience, had more to lose, right? It was a different experience. It was a lot more profound, frankly. I think as a founder, right? The first time I founded companies, I was a bit naive. I think I was a lot more open-eyed, clear-eyed the second time. It was not any easier. We tend to think that when things go well, it's all our credit, and when things go poorly, it's always extraneous circumstances. The reality, it's both. I think to a certain extent, product, market, founder, team fit, right? Yes, there are a lot of things you could do to try to be successful, but there's an element of luck. Now, good, I would argue that hard work and sticking at it and not giving up allows you to create your own luck in many ways. And eventually you do get lucky, right? If just through sheer persistence. But it is much harder the second time. And, I did have a bit of a break where I was serving on for-profit and nonprofit boards. I was a lead investor in the company. But it was but I quickly found myself kind of pulled back into being an entrepreneur because I think, for those of us who are wired to want to solve hard problems and work with great teams, that's kind of steady state for us.
Got it. Well, and to kind of talk through, even go through it somewhat quickly, but what you got involved with next, and kind of then how you get us up to kind of current day in some way. It's a lot of.
Yeah.
You went through many different iterations, if you will, in the same space, but I know you were in touch a lot of different things. So, yeah.
Yeah. So BoodleBox had a prior CEO. We had a prior product. When ChatGPT happened, we decided as a team to pivot. I stepped in as the new CEO, largely self-funded the pivot. Again, when you believe in something, you go all in on it. And that's what became BoodleBox. It's a brand new product. We kept some members of the team, others, we needed people that were, different product. It was a different fit, different team members. That was over 2.5 years ago. And built a new product, took it to market. And, about a year in now, we are at the place where we've got 32,000 users across over 1,000 colleges, universities, and organizations. We just, are now largely through a seed round have raised, several $1 million from venture capital funds and angel investors who believe in our vision and what we're building. And I think we're on the path to build something pretty amazing and pretty great.
That's awesome. And from a I know raising capital always seems to be the name of the game in a lot of these startup and founders. And I assume you're doing it in multiple ways, from angel investors, from the VC side. How much time? I know it's never fun to do that, but I feel like that's what a lot of founders have to do the most of. is going out
Yeah.
there and giving the elevator pitch. I mean, any insights or thoughts on how do you get people to believe in what you're selling? Like, I mean, there's a lot of people getting pitched all the time, I mean, how do you break through the squelch on that? I assume, again, you've been successful once. That will give you a phone call, right? You probably have a Rolodex because of your previous successes, but for the guys that don't maybe have that track record, I mean, that's got to be, I believe that to be probably the hardest thing, is to get somebody to get the time, and then to, I mean, if you give 100 pitches and maybe one takes, that's a hard thing. I mean, I don't know, any advice or thoughts on that?
Yeah, it is.
Part of
It is a
yeah.
hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is a hard thing, even if you've been a successful founder. In my case, I was trying to raise money for a company that had some history. That's a black mark. That is in the education, at least initially is viewed as an education technology. That's another black mark. A lot of investors don't like that. And my biggest competitors are OpenAI and Microsoft, which is a bit of a black mark. So this was not, despite being a prior successful founder, I had plenty of folks that didn't even take a call and told me no right away. I ended up talking with over 140 venture capital funds and private equity funds and angel investors to raise this round. And I got 3 term sheets. So it was one term sheet for about every 50 people I talked with, right? That's not unusual. So for those of you who are raising money and you're 20 or 30 no's deep, you're just getting started. That is, so you got to have thick skin. Understand that it will teach you a lot of humility. You're going to have a lot of people tell you no, and not just no, but no, and what the heck are you thinking? Why are you even doing this? What's always amazing to me is I would tell one investor something, and they would tell me basically like, I don't know why you're doing that. That's a dumb idea. They were much more polite about it, right? But that's essentially what their view was. I would tell another investor the same thing, and they'd be like, that's brilliant. I totally get it. I 100% agree. And I quickly realized then that it's not about right or wrong, right? It's about finding someone who's aligned with you and who believes in it the same way you believe in it. And so ultimately, there's a lot of analogies to dating and raising money, right? Like there's no right or wrong way to be yourself, right? You just got to be true to yourself and find the partner who believes in the same things you do. By the way, that what I just said applies to both dating and to raising money. Right? So you're ultimately looking, you don't want to just raise money from anybody. You want to raise money from the people who are going to be great partners, right? And so now there is an art and a skill to raising money. And just because you're a good CEO and can run a good company doesn't mean you're going to be good at raising money. So I actually strongly believe that you need to learn the art and skill of raising money as well. And it's frankly something that investors want to see, is that you have the ability to raise, to be able to raise money. So, but you're going to kiss a lot of frogs. You should be true to yourself, and you should constantly look at it as a way to improve. I am a much better money raiser, right? Now 150 pitches in than I was at the beginning.
Sure. Yep, it's getting repetitions. I mean, that's a huge part of it. And again, it's your story is such a great one. Again, from where you started, Vietnam through West Point, and the challenges and obstacles you faced, but just jumped into them full bore every time and found so many positives in what could have been seen as negatives. And again, I love your path. Again, I think there's everyone we talk to on the podcast has a different trajectory, and they get there in different ways. And yours certainly is one of the most unique ones, not only because of your, where you were born and how you got there into the military, but just your career path from being a lawyer, being in the White House, to getting into this founder space and the investment space. But I think your insights are so spot on and relatable, and really appreciate that. And Any thoughts? I mean, again, you know the kind of audience we're talking to here with the MilVet and Brendan and Tim. I mean, thoughts you want to share with this group, or I mean,
Yeah.
what if things maybe you wish you knew if you had to do it all again, or kind of what would you close up with? Yeah.
Yeah, two thoughts, and I've said this other places as well, so this is going to be a common refrain. The first is ignore sunk costs. We tend to limit our option set artificially. We tend to say, here's my choices, and we don't look broad enough, mainly because we limit ourselves, right? Like, oh, I've been in the Army for 15 years, so I need to stay in for another 5 to retire. No, you don't. I mean, you probably should because that's a good idea, but you don't have to, right? I've spent 15 years doing this thing. If I do a pivot, then I'm giving up on 15 years. 15 years is a waste. No, it isn't. It's the same whether you pivot or don't pivot. It's sunk costs. So ignore sunk costs. It opens up a world of possibilities for yourself. The second thing is, as much in life as possible, move towards things, not away from things. So don't quit a job because you hate a job. Quit a job because you discovered something else you have a passion for and you want to move towards that. And so it's, the way to move forward is to move towards things, not away from things. Those are the two pieces of advice I have.
That's great advice. And I love that idea of I think there's, people I see it all the time. They say, well, I've been doing the same thing for 12 years. They feel like they're stuck, but you're not. You're right. I mean, I think that's just some great words of wisdom. I mean, people do 18, 20, 25 years in the military and start a whole new career after that, doing something completely different. So it's never too late to reinvent, to restart, especially if it's something you believe in and have passion for. I mean, you can do it. I mean, and you're a great example of doing that several times over, through your career, reinventing yourself and figuring out what fires you up and what gets you motivated. And I really appreciate too, France, all you do to help out other folks and, spending the time to help those folks, send the elevator back down. I think that's what you certainly grew up wanting to give back, and definitely doing that as well. And being on this show and sharing your time with us today and with the audience is wonderful. So truly appreciate that. So thank you very much for the time today.
Yeah. And towards that, I always, I love it when veterans reach out, veterans who are thinking about a transition, veterans who are thinking about starting a business. So you can find me on LinkedIn, France, like the country, the letter Q, and then Hoang, Hoang. So don't hesitate to send me a LinkedIn request or a LinkedIn message. I'm always have 15 minutes for a fellow veteran.
Appreciate that. Again, thanks for continuing to send that elevator back down and help those folks that can definitely use your help. I wish you the best of luck in your current venture and hope to see big things out of that in the future, and look forward to hopefully meeting you in person, see you in person again soon. So thanks again, France. Appreciate the time out here.
Thanks, Beau.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this episode. For more content, follow us on Instagram @TheMilitaryVet or on LinkedIn. Join us at an upcoming event or learn more on our website, TheMilVet.org. Feel free to email us directly at leadership@TheMilVet.org. Thank you so much and take care.